chosen one. Everyone left you, so you could walk with God alone. You weren't abandoned by accident. You were chosen for isolation on purpose. In a world that clamors for constant connection and validation, your path has been radically different. You've looked around and seen the room empty. The messages stopped. The phone stayed silent. The invitations never came. And you wondered, was it something I did? Was it something I failed to be? The truth is far deeper than any rejection could explain. You weren't cut off because you were unworthy. You were pulled aside because you were being refined. This is a chapter about wishes coming true and energizing the universe. So if you're watching this, I encourage you to stay until the end and write your warmest wishes and the number 99 in the comments to anchor your energy in light. You've been asking for something greater. You've been yearning for clarity, peace, breakthrough, but didn't realize that the path to receiving it would look like being left alone. When everyone left, it wasn't to punish you. It was to position you. You weren't pushed into the shadows to wither. You were planted in secret so you could rise in silence. Solitude was never your prison. It was your sanctuary. Walking alone is not a curse. It's a sacred alignment. It's the hush of heaven, preparing you for something loud. You've been feeling the sting of distance, but God has been drawing you closer in that stillness. The voices you thought you needed to hear were muted, so you could finally hear the only voice that matters. You weren't abandoned. You were called aside. Think of the moments that broke you, the friendships that vanished, the relationships that crumbled, the family who misunderstood, the friends who drifted like smoke in the wind. It hurt. It confused you. But now, in the quiet, you're beginning to see what you couldn't before. You didn't lose them. You outgrew the illusions you once mistook for love. You're being purified. The noise is being stripped. The old is falling away. Not everyone can walk with you where you're going. That's why they couldn't stay. That's why they turned away when you needed them the most. That's why silence became your closest companion. Because God needed your full attention. Because what He's about to do through you couldn't happen in the presence of distraction. You're not forgotten. You're not overlooked. You're being rebuilt in silence, in stillness, in solitude. Where others would collapse, you are being solidified. You were never designed to follow the crowd. You were never meant to blend in. And so, to protect your purpose, everything that wasn't real had to fall away. You may have begged for connection, pleaded for answers, cried for companionship, but God gave you something deeper, Himself. And the walk you're on now, though it feels like exile, is actually intimacy. It's not punishment. It's presence. Not abandonment, but advancement. The enemy thought he could isolate you to weaken you, but that isolation became your elevation. You discovered power in prayer, strength in stillness, wisdom in the whisper. No longer pulled by people's opinions, no longer defined by external applause, no longer distracted by the superficial. You have roots now. You have depth. You have God. It had to happen this way. The separation, the misunderstanding, the isolation, it was sacred. You thought you were losing everything, but you were gaining something far greater. Divine focus, divine alignment, divine preparation. And now, you don't crave their validation. You walk with vision. You walk with fire. You walk with God. This path isn't easy, but it's holy. And the ones who left? They couldn't carry the weight of your calling. They weren't built for your next chapter. Some doors closed not because of your failure, but because of your growth. Some hearts turned away not because you were too much, but because you were becoming too powerful to be controlled. You're not who you used to be. You've transformed in silence. You've healed in hidden places. And now you're rising. Not loud, but legendary. The chosen ones don't rise through crowds. They rise through crucibles. You didn't choose this silence, but you embraced it. You didn't ask for the wilderness, but you've become a warrior in it. You know what it means now to rely on God alone, to find comfort not in a crowd, but in the Creator. And in doing so, you've unlocked something unshakable, a peace that doesn't need permission, a joy that's not dependent on people, a purpose that isn't threatened by being misunderstood. You've walked through rejection and discovered revelation. You've faced betrayal and found blessing. You've endured loss and emerged with light. And now, as you continue walking this narrow, sacred path, you carry something rare, divine resilience. No more asking why they left. No more trying to reopen closed doors. No more wishing you could go back. The ones who left were never meant to stay. Their absence is your blessing. Their silence is your sign. Their distance is your direction. You were set apart, not for punishment, but for power. Not for rejection, but for refinement. Not for exile, but for elevation. And now you walk, not alone, but with the one who has always been with you. And this is only the beginning. You kept wondering when the shift would come. You kept praying for breakthrough, for change, for peace. What you didn't know was that it was already happening. Quietly, secretly, deep within. Every moment you spent alone wasn't wasted. It was sacred space, preparing you for a transformation no one could see coming. In that stillness, your spirit was waking up. In that silence, your strength was returning. While others ran toward noise and distraction, you were being rooted. Others were rushing into crowds to be seen, but you were being hidden to be refined. Not because you were weak, but because what you carry is weighty, holy, rare. You see now what you couldn't before. Being left behind wasn't the loss you thought it was. It was the launch. You were launched into a deeper connection, a new frequency, a heightened awareness. You began to discern the spiritual currents underneath people's words. You saw past masks, beyond appearances, through energy. And suddenly, the company you once craved no longer fit your soul's frequency. They left because they couldn't handle who you were becoming. They left because your light started exposing their shadows. They left because your healing made them uncomfortable. And now that you're no longer seeking their approval, you're free to seek the truth. You don't chase validation. You don't chase friendship. You don't chase love. You radiate, and what's meant for you is magnetized. Your walk has become different, deliberate, aligned. No more compromising to belong. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. You have shed the need to explain yourself. Your spirit now speaks louder than your words ever could. And though you walk without a crowd, you move with a force that turns every step into purpose. People thought you were losing your mind when you started changing. They mocked your stillness. They misunderstood your silence. They questioned your decisions, but they didn't know you were walking with the unseen, that every step was being guided by a divine GPS, one they couldn't access because they refused the silence you embraced. And in this silence, you gained more than you ever imagined. You heard things you couldn't hear when surrounded by noise. You saw visions that required a still soul. You felt guidance that needed a quiet heart. The walk alone purified your intuition, amplified your discernment, and fortified your faith. This isn't about proving anything to anyone. You're not here to convince the doubters or chase after the ones who walked away. Your focus now is on the path, not the past, on the mission, not the memories. Because what's ahead of you demands all of you. No distractions, no confusion, no detours. And now, because you walked through the valley, you know the terrain. You know what loneliness tastes like, but you also know what divine comfort feels like. You've sat in the darkness and discovered the light within you. You've cried on the floor and risen in power. You've screamed in frustration, only to be met with whispers of peace from a realm others can't hear. They called you crazy for isolating. They said you were changing too much, that you were going too far. But what they didn't realize is you had to go far. You had to leave behind the shallow to find the sacred. You had to risk being misunderstood in order to understand yourself. You had to be alone so you could meet the one you were always seeking. And that encounter changed everything. Now you walk with assurance, with fire in your bones and peace in your chest. You're not who you used to be, and that's your power. They can't manipulate you like they used to, can't guilt you, shame you, silence you. You know too much. You've seen too much. You've survived too much to ever settle again. So you walk, not with bitterness, but with boundaries, not with anger, but with anointing, not with revenge, but with revelation. The people who left didn't break you. They revealed you. The space they vacated made room for something holy. And now, your life isn't filled with noise. It's filled with knowing. You no longer need to be seen because you know who you are. You no longer beg for attention because you carry presence. And you no longer feel empty because now you are full of purpose. You had to walk alone so you could be emptied of the false and filled with the real. Let others chase the spotlight. You found your source. Let them misunderstand. You found your mission. Let them talk. You're walking, and every step you take from this moment forward is blessed, because it is guided by something eternal. You used to think the pain of being left behind was punishment, but now you see clearly it was preparation. When the messages stopped, when the support disappeared, when even those closest to you turned cold, it didn't mean you were unworthy. It meant you were being prepared for a level of destiny that requires complete clarity and absolute trust, because not everyone can be allowed into your sacred process. Not everyone can witness your becoming. And so, by divine design, you were hidden to be healed, hidden to be transformed, hidden so your spirit could grow wings in silence, wings that aren't built for the approval of others, but for divine flight. You weren't created to walk the well-lit path. You were made to trailblaze through the dark and come out glowing. The isolation, that was your incubation. The silence, that was your sharpening. While others ran from being alone, you leaned into it. And there, in the depth of solitude, you became unshakable. You know what it's like to pray with tears in your eyes and no one watching. You know what it's like to celebrate small wins in the quiet while the world was silent toward you. You know what it's like to build with broken hands, with no applause, no help, no recognition, just a sacred inner knowing that what you're doing matters. And now, your walk has power, not because it's perfect, but because it's personal. You carry a fire that was lit in the furnace of abandonment. You carry wisdom that was carved out of seasons of silence. You carry grace that was poured into your life while you were surrounded by absence. They thought you were falling apart, but really, you were falling into alignment. The breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning of your awakening. The rejection wasn't a stop, it was a redirection. And every lonely night, every silent season, every ignored message was a stepping stone to spiritual strength. You weren't designed to be popular. You were designed to be powerful, and true power is forged when no one's watching, when there's no audience, no crowd, just you and your maker. That's where the chosen are made, in the shadows, in the silence, in the solitude. That's where you found your real voice. That's where you learned that peace isn't found in people, it's found in presence. That's where you realized joy doesn't come from being included, it comes from being aligned. So now, when you walk differently. You no longer look around to see who's watching. You're no longer checking who stayed and who left. You're no longer giving your energy to those who don't honor it. You move with authority. You move with clarity. You move with sacred stillness. The silence that once scared you now strengthens you. The aloneness that once hurt you now holds you. The space that once felt like exile now feels like elevation. Because you understand now, you were chosen to walk with God alone, not because you were less, but because you were meant for more. And those who misunderstood you, who abandoned you, who mocked your journey, they don't realize they were watching the rise of something eternal, something fierce, something uncontainable. They'll remember the day they turned their back on you, not with regret, but with reverence, because while they laughed, you were being lifted. While they talked, you were being transformed. While they dismissed you, heaven was endorsing you. And now, you don't need to explain your peace. You don't need to justify your joy. You don't need to prove your worth, because the fruit of your life is evidence enough. The glow you carry, the calm you walk in, the wisdom you speak with, the grace that surrounds you. All of it speaks louder than anything you could say. This is the reward of walking alone. You find yourself, you find your source, you find a strength no crowd could ever give. And that strength will carry you into rooms no one thought you belonged in. It will open doors no one saw coming. It will build bridges no one could block. Because when you walk with God, you walk with all you need. Keep walking, keep rising, keep glowing. Your path is holy, your process is protected, and your presence is powerful. Not because everyone sees it, but because heaven backs it. You don't need them to return. You don't need them to understand. You don't need to explain a thing, because what's coming is louder than any apology. They'll say you changed, and they'll be right. But they'll never know the cost of that change. They'll never feel the nights you cried in silence, wondering why you had to lose so much just to gain peace. They won't see the hours you spent rebuilding yourself from the ground up with nothing but faith and fragments. All they'll see is the new version of you, standing taller, speaking clearer, moving differently. And they'll wonder how. But only you and God know what it took, because this kind of transformation doesn't happen in public. It happens in the hidden. The nights where your tears spoke prayers your mouth couldn't form. The days where you felt invisible, but kept showing up for yourself anyway. The moments where your heart wanted to break down, but your spirit kept whispering, "Not yet. Keep going." You've been through a kind of refining that left no part of you untouched. It stripped the lies. It broke the illusions. It shattered your attachments. And what was left? The truth. The unshakable, powerful, radiant truth of who you are and who you're becoming. You don't fear being alone anymore, because now you understand that solitude is where the sacred lives. It's where clarity finds you. It's where your real assignment reveals itself, without the opinions, without the expectations, without the pressure to perform. And now, you no longer walk into rooms wondering if you belong, because you understand that your presence is the shift. You are not here to fit in. You are here to transform atmospheres. You are not here to echo the noise. You are here to release truth. You are not here for approval. You are here for purpose. The people who walked away didn't realize they were clearing your space. The ones who left didn't know they were making room for alignment. You weren't abandoned, you were rearranged, strategically, spiritually, perfectly. Because what's coming next requires the strongest, clearest, most authentic version of you. The version that isn't swayed by opinions, the version that no longer needs permission, the version that has walked through fire and emerged pure, purposeful, focused. You're not chasing anything anymore. You're not proving anything anymore. You're aligned. You're elevated. You're chosen. And the power that now moves through you, it's divine. You no longer crave what once comforted your old self. You're not returning to the patterns, the people, or the places that once felt like home, because they no longer match the frequency of your future. You've outgrown them, not out of arrogance, but out of obedience to the transformation that called you. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them think you lost your way. You know the truth. You've never been clearer. You've never been stronger. You've never been more in tune with the divine rhythm guiding your every step. You're walking with the unseen. You're guided by a knowing. You're moved by a presence that needs no validation, and this presence has been leading you step by step away from what drains you and toward what grows you. So if it left, let it go. If it turned away, let it be. If it stayed silent, don't chase it. Because everything that is meant for you will meet you on this path. Not in the crowd, not in the noise, but in the stillness of purpose. You're not alone. You're aligned. You're not forgotten. You're favored. You're not behind. You're being built. This is the beauty of divine separation. It doesn't subtract, it multiplies. It doesn't break you, it blesses you. It doesn't diminish you, it defines you. The silence you've endured is echoing into your future. The pain you carried is now your power. And the absence of others has been the amplification of your own voice. You don't have to be louder to be heard. You just have to be real. You don't have to be seen to be powerful. You just have to be present. And you don't have to wait for someone to walk with you, because the path is already holy with just you and God. Your journey doesn't need a crowd. Your calling doesn't need consensus. Your growth doesn't need confirmation. You are chosen. You are covered. You are rising, exactly as planned. They'll never admit it, but some of the people who left you were never prepared for who you were becoming. They didn't walk away because you did something wrong. They left because your evolution made them uncomfortable, because you began breaking out of boxes they had built for you, because you stopped living in the expectations they silently held over your life. And some didn't leave in silence. They left with cruelty, with gossip, with betrayal, with coldness you didn't deserve. You gave them grace, and they gave you judgment. You offered loyalty, and they returned it with absence. You needed support, and they chose silence. You needed love, and they chose distance. Let's be honest. Some of it broke you. It shattered pieces of your trust. It left scars on your confidence. It made you question everything: yourself, your worth, your path. There were days you couldn't eat, nights you couldn't sleep, moments when your chest felt too heavy and your spirit felt too empty. You begged for answers. You cried out for justice. You wanted closure, peace, something to make the betrayal make sense. But none of it came. Only silence, only space, only solitude. And yet, that very silence became the soil for your transformation. That very space became the place where you met the most powerful version of yourself. That solitude became the holy ground where God whispered, "Let them go. You're rising now." Because what they meant to break you, built you. What they used to wound you, awakened you. What they did in darkness brought you into the light. And now, you're no longer angry. You're aware. You're no longer bitter. You're better. You no longer seek revenge. You seek results. You walk forward not with the weight of what they did, but with the wisdom it gave you. You don't need to revisit those memories. You've mined them for all their meaning. You don't need to go back to that season. It served its purpose. You don't need their apology, their explanation, or their return. You're free now. Free from the emotional debt they left you with. Free from the story they tried to write for you. Free from the limits they tried to place on your power. And maybe the most painful part wasn't that they left, but that they never saw you fully. They didn't see your heart, your loyalty, your light. They only saw the version of you that made them comfortable, the version they could control, the version that served their convenience. But when you started glowing, when your truth became louder than your silence, when your peace disturbed their patterns, they couldn't stay. And that's okay. Let them go with love. Release them with peace. Because you were never supposed to carry people who refuse to grow with you. You were never meant to keep dead energy around just to avoid being alone. And now, here you are, more alive than ever. Because you stopped waiting, stopped begging, stopped trying to convince people to love you who were committed to misunderstanding you. You've learned to bless their absence and honor your own presence. To grieve, then grow. To feel the sting, then find the strength. To forgive, not for them, but for your freedom. And now, no one can use your past against you. No one can manipulate you through fear of abandonment. You've already walked through that valley, and you came out radiant. You're not afraid of being left anymore. You've turned that ache into authority. You've turned that pain into purpose. And now, you stand in your truth. Not because they believed in you, but because you chose to believe in yourself when no one else did. They thought they were ending you, but they were triggering the beginning of the strongest chapter of your life. The chapter where you stop surviving and start shining. The chapter where you stop explaining and start embodying. The chapter where you walk fully, fiercely, finally, with God, alone, but never lonely. Because now you know their absence was your upgrade. Their silence was your signal. Their exit was your entrance into a greater calling. And you didn't just survive what they did, you transcended it. You're no longer the person they left. You're the person they could never break. There comes a time in every chosen one's life when you stop looking back completely. Not because the past didn't matter, but because it no longer defines you. That moment has arrived for you. You're not tethered to who hurt you. You're not haunted by who walked away. You're not held hostage by who couldn't love you right. That chapter has closed. Not because it faded, but because you finally turned the page. You've realized the solitude that once made you question your worth actually revealed your worth. Because when everyone else's voice disappeared, you finally heard your own. When no one came to save you, you realized you had the strength to rise without being rescued. And in doing so, you became unstoppable. This new version of you, it doesn't chase, it doesn't explain, it doesn't beg. It understands that what left was never meant to stay, and what's aligned will never force you to shrink. You've accepted the truth. You had to be left behind so you could move forward, not with bitterness, but with blessing, not with pain, but with purpose. And yes, there are still echoes, memories that sometimes visit you in the quiet, names that rise in your mind uninvited, scenarios you replay to make sense of what felt so senseless. But now, those memories don't control you. They don't direct your day. They don't dim your light. You acknowledge them, then you move forward, because you know now that your story is bigger than who exited it. Let's speak it clearly. They were never meant to complete you. They were never your source. They were never your foundation. They were visitors, part of a season, not your forever. And though it once felt like they were essential, you've discovered the truth. They were temporary teachers in your eternal transformation. You learned how to stand when no one applauded. You learned how to believe when no one confirmed your vision. You learned how to love yourself when no one else did. And because of that, you carry something few understand: divine resilience. You walk with an inner calm that doesn't need noise. You speak with a power that comes from experience, not ego. You glow from a light that was formed in the dark. This is what happens when God rewrites your identity in solitude, when the crowds leave and the silence speaks, when the noise fades and the truth surfaces, when the illusions break and your soul breathes. You've outgrown needing to be seen. You've outgrown needing to be understood. You've outgrown living on borrowed love from people who couldn't even love themselves. And now you're whole, not because someone else filled the void, but because you stopped running from it. You sat with the ache. You held space for the grief. You didn't rush the process. You honored the pain until it taught you everything you needed to know. That's why you're rising now. Not quickly, but surely. Not loudly, but profoundly. Not for applause, but for purpose. And make no mistake, those who left will feel it. Not from a place of revenge, but from the undeniable presence of your peace. They'll sense the difference. They'll notice the light. They'll see the elevation. And deep down, they'll remember what they once walked away from and who you've now become. But don't look back for them. Don't slow down, hoping they'll return. Don't water yourself down to make your light less blinding to those still living in the shadows. You're not for everyone, and that's your power. Your path is narrow because your calling is rare. Your silence was deep because your foundation is strong. Your journey was lonely because your purpose is massive. You had to walk alone so your spirit could remember what it feels like to walk with God, without distractions, without doubt, without dilution. And now, you're not just walking, you're soaring, above the pain, above the confusion, above the noise. You're no longer just trying to make it, you're becoming it, the one they never saw coming, the one who rose anyway, the one who walked alone and discovered they were never alone at all. This is your time. This is your moment. This is your emergence. And nothing, no one, can stop what's been divinely ignited within you. Let the past stay behind. Let the wounds stay healed. Let your story unfold in its glory. You are chosen. You are free. And you are finally, fully, walking in the divine light of your own becoming. They would never believe the things you've overcome just to stand where you are now. Not because they couldn't see your struggle, but because your strength makes it look easy. But you know the nights you had to breathe through pain silently, when even your own thoughts felt like enemies. You know the mornings you had to drag yourself out of bed without a single soul to encourage you. You remember what it was like to be surrounded by people and still feel invisible, like a ghost in your own story. But here's the thing, your survival wasn't a fluke. It wasn't luck. It wasn't random. It was divine. There is something inside of you that refused to let go, even when everything else did. Something sacred, something eternal, something born in the fire of abandonment, but refined in the waters of grace. That something is why you're still here. That's what they couldn't break. You don't need their validation anymore. You don't need their apology. You don't even need them to admit they were wrong. You've already moved past that level of healing. Now you're no longer reacting to what they did. You're responding to who you're becoming. And who you're becoming is a force, a rare frequency, a powerful presence. You don't have time for small talk anymore. You don't have space for surface connections. You don't water yourself down just to keep others comfortable. You've paid too high a price in silence to ever silence yourself again. Let them say you changed. You have radically, beautifully, irreversibly. The kind of change that only comes when you've walked through fires of rejection and still came out glowing. You've learned how to keep walking, even when your heart was broken. You've learned how to smile without needing a reason, how to love yourself without conditions, how to believe in the future, even when the present made no sense. And now, you're walking not for escape, but for expression, not out of fear, but with faith, not to avoid pain, but to embrace purpose. Because even though the road has been long, even though the silence was deafening at times, you finally understand. It was never about the people who left. It was about the strength you found because of it. You've become someone who doesn't need crowds. You carry your own energy. You don't seek attention. You radiate essence. You don't beg for love. You are love, grounded and glowing. That's why now, when people meet you, they feel it. That energy, that calm, that fire, that clarity. It can't be copied. It can't be faked. It's earned in silence, in solitude, in sacred struggle. And as for those who left, bless them. They played their part. They delivered the rejection that built your resilience. They gave you the space you never knew you needed. And now, they're just a line in a story that's still being written in power and grace. You see, the people who couldn't walk with you through the valley will never understand how you're glowing on the mountain. And that's okay. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them watch. Because you no longer walk for applause. You walk for purpose. You walk in alignment. You walk with peace that can't be disturbed, with joy that doesn't require permission, with power that doesn't need validation. You've seen what happens when you depend on people, and what happens when you depend on presence. You've learned to trust the divine whispers more than the loud opinions. You've learned that being chosen isn't glamorous. It's gritty. It's lonely. It's misunderstood. But it's worth it. And now, you carry a truth so deep, so pure, so raw, no one can argue with your transformation. Your story isn't theory, it's testimony. Your healing isn't a concept, it's a lived reality. And your purpose isn't a dream, it's the fire that wakes you up each day. You are the walking proof that silence does not equal defeat, that isolation does not equal insignificance, that being left behind is not the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of the realest journey you'll ever take. And now, look at you, walking with grace, speaking with authority, moving with divine timing. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't need to carry anyone who can't hold space for your light. You don't need to pretend you're still who they remember, because you've evolved beyond recognition. So keep walking, chosen one. Even if it's still quiet, even if it's still lonely, even if it's still misunderstood. You're not walking without purpose. You're walking into promise. The road ahead is different, yes, but so are you. This is your rise. This is your redemption. This is your divine confirmation that everyone left you. so you could walk with God alone. And in that walk, you found everything.